Wow, I'm just floored myself, It's so great having these. Aren't these guys amazing? And these gals, and Barbara, just one after the other, just amazing teachers, amazing models. These are really great people, don't you think? All these reasons there. And the thing about it is that whenever I find trainers for you and choose them, and et cetera, the most important thing is, do they have heart? Do they have spirit? Are they real teachers? Are they real what? Are they real teachers, or are they public speakers? To me, and I'm not saying anything wrong with it, there's a big difference between a public speaker and a teacher. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about here. A public speaker generally is just a person who's out there. They kind of got a script going, and they've got all the little nuances, and they got the little inflections, and they know just how to pause before a real major piece. They got all that thing down, and I don't have any of that shit down, right? And here's the thing: all of our trainers, they're just amazing people. I just look up to them. They're so smart. And when I know these people personally, which is such a blessing, you really get to see another level of living that most people don't live at. And I certainly, have come through the ranks, but I just look at these people, and I get a chance to be with them and meet them and play with them and go to events with them, and they come to my events. I get a chance to talk with them a little bit. These are very, very, very high echelon people. I hope you recognize that. I hope you appreciate that. And I just, they're just not the norm. They're very, very, very unusual in the fact that they really have one thing in common. Do you know what that is? They have worked on themselves, just like you are doing. They have worked. I think there was a line there. I forget who said it, but it was a great line. It said, we're born fine, and then we end up defined. Who said that? Who was it? Oh, yeah. Okay, so thanks. I heard both names going at once. Is it Alan or is it Cohen? Okay, maybe it's Alan Cohen, right. And what a great line that is, because we all are born miracles, yes or yes? Totally miraculous. We're like creatures of spirit, creatures of God, whatever you want to call the higher force, complete, nothing but intelligence and wisdom, totally tapped in, total spirit, and then we get conditioned. We get all this stuff in us from everybody else, and we have to defend ourselves, and we have to survive, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens is, you shouldn't, quote unquote, shouldn't have to work on being a better you. You shouldn't have to, quote unquote. But what happens is, it's like you shouldn't have to take the garbage out. But if you don't, it starts to stink in there. Yes or yes? And none of you would be here if you didn't have some, let's call it, aromas you weren't pleased with in the box, yes? And so we look at those aromas, we go, you know what, I've had enough of this aroma. I don't like the way it smells. And I want something better. So we start working on taking out that trash, yes or yes? And I'm very, very proud of all of you for doing that. You didn't have to be here. You chose. What's the word? You chose to be here. You chose it because you're divine. You're guided to do that by a divine nature. And you chose it because you knew in your heart this was the place for you to be. Yes or yes? How many of you have made a great choice so far? Yes? Awesome. You couldn't make a wrong choice on that. All right. So I'm very, very proud of you. And again, it's my absolute honor to bring up our next trainer for you, our next presenter. I've got a whole script over here, yada, yada, yada. I'm not using any of it because this guy's a bud, and you're not going to find a nicer man in your whole life. And I think that niceness counts. Do you think so? Do you believe that? And, I do the best I can with what I've got, but I will only love to emulate what he has in his heart. He is such a kind person, such a nice person. He's such a giving person. And he's brilliant. Another brilliant trainer. Oh my gosh, okay? Another brilliant man on our stage. Really, really smart. Really enlightened. Really has done the work on himself. A really amazing teacher. Another amazing healer of lives. His programs, again, I think that Peak Potentials run some great programs. Would you agree with that? And I'm going to be honest with you. There's not that many programs out there I would say, oh, you've got to do that. I think everything is great, but I wouldn't say, you have to do that. But whatever you can do with this gentleman, like with Barbara and some of our other people, if you can do work with him, if you can get into one of his like major seminars, you're going to get something massive out of it. Because he works deep, like us. He works deep. He works with the roots. He works with programming. He works with reconditioning. And he's a master at it. There's nobody I know in the entire business of training and personal development who utilizes and knows more processes, exercises for getting you to move from one place to another than this gentleman. He is not a speaker. If he speaks to you today, it's because he's speaking to you, okay? I'm sure he'll throw in a couple exercises here and there. But this man is the master. What's the word? Master. Of experiential learning. And if you have an opportunity to learn more from him, I would advise you to take it, whether it's now or later at some point in your life, whatever you feel. But he is a true master at this. And anything you can glean from him, take it, own it, receive it. Buy into it, at least for right now. Use it in your life. And as you know, as we always say, if it doesn't work, you can always what? Throw it out. But this is, again, somebody that I have learned so much from myself. And I am blessed to call him my friend. You may know him from his partnership with Mark Victor Hansen in selling a gazillion, billion, trillion chicken soup for the soul books. You might also know him from being one of the stars of the movie The Secret. And who am I talking about? None other than the most amazing guy in the whole planet who cut his vacation short with his family from Europe just to be here today with you. Jack Canfield. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, go ahead and sit down, sit down, sit down. Thank you. That's fabulous. I used to be in a folk singing group in high school and always wanted to be a rock star, and today it feels like that, you know, one of those outdoor rock places. I want to say a couple of things. Harv's introduction was wonderful. I appreciate all I'm not going to do a lot of processes with you today. I am going to share some ideas with you and some insights and some of my own personal story. Hopefully it will inspire you. Some of the tools I'll share with you may be new, may be empowering. It's kind of like coming to a place where everyone's done 100,000 workshops already, but I think I can share some new ideas with you. I want to share a chicken soup story with you. There was a story that was sent in by Norman Cousins, and Norman was the editor of Saturday Review magazine, and he coined the term psychoneuroimmunology. Your psyche, your attitude affects your neurosystem, affects your immune system. We know the more positive you are, the more optimistic you are, the higher your attitude is in terms of positive expectation and joy, the less ill you get, and then if you do get ill, you get better quicker. And he sent in this story called The Wee Nurse. Can I see a show of hands? How many of you have been in the hospital overnight? Can I see a show of hands? Have you ever had a wee nurse? A wee nurse comes in the morning and says, Did we sleep okay last night? We didn't eat all our breakfast today, did we? And a favorite one that he hated was she'd come in and say, we haven't had our bowel movement yet today, have we? And this we thing irritated him. And one day he decided he wanted to get back at her. So she came in and she had a little plastic cup. She said, we need a urine sample. And he said, okay, if you'll leave the room, we'll make one. So she left and went out in the hall. And he looked over on his breakfast tray, and it was a glass of apple juice, which he had not yet drunk. He took the apple juice, poured it into the specimen cup, rang the little buzzer. She came back in. He handed it to her. She looked at it and said, my, we're a little cloudy today, aren't we? He said, here, give it back. And he grabbed it back from her, took the cap off, and then proceeded to drink the whole thing down and said, let me run it through again for you. I'll see if I can make it come out clearer this time. Now, I was over in Bangkok. How many of you have been to Bangkok, Thailand? How many of you have seen the Golden Buddha? It's one of the 3 tourist attractions. You always see the Jade Buddha, the Golden Buddha, and the reclining Buddha, and that kind of thing. And this Buddha is 10.5 feet tall of solid gold. The gold value alone is about $196 million. That doesn't even count the artistic and the historical value. And when my wife was taking that picture, I was over next to I'd say about 5 feet away, there was a big glass case. And in that case, there was a piece of clay about 1 foot wide, 2 feet tall, 2 feet thick. And it said that in 1953, they did not know there was such a thing as a golden Buddha. They were moving this large clay Buddha from one side of Bangkok to the other to make room for a road that was coming through. And as they picked up the Buddha with the crane, because it was very heavy, a big crack went down through it. And as the crack went down through it, the head monk got scared and he lowered the Buddha down. And he said, we better take a look at it and see if we've done any damage to it. And it started to rain, so they put a canvas over it to keep it dry. That night, the monk came out and he shined a flashlight in to see if it was staying dry, and something reflected back from inside the crack. He said, clay does not reflect light. There must be something else in there. And so the next morning, they chipped away in behind where they wouldn't see it if they made a mistake, and lo and behold, sure enough, was this golden Buddha. And their best theory is that 300 years earlier, when the Burmese were attacking Thailand, the monks of this monastery covered up the golden Buddha with clay to make it look worthless so they wouldn't steal it. They also think all the monks were killed in a massacre, and the secret died with the monks. And then they rediscovered it. The word discover means what? Take the cover off of, discover something. It was always in there, but they took the cover off. I was having dinner with my wife that night, and she said, Jack, that Buddha is like all the people in our seminars. They come in with this cover of clay of their negative beliefs, their self-doubt, their sense of guilt and shame, their beliefs that they're not enough, that they're not worthy, they don't deserve. And what we really do is we take the clay off so this golden essence can come and be there as who they are again, their true identity. It's not like we put anything in. It's just that we remove the things that are not there. I think Barbara talked a little about that earlier today. So as we go through this next hour and a half, think about and hold that metaphor, that image of the Buddha, and it could be the golden Christ, the golden Buddha, the Atman, the source, whatever you want to call it, but that's who you really are. And although we do a lot of things of giving you more information and tools and all of that, really if you were to stop doing the stuff that's negative, as Harv said, you've been defined. When you came in, you were just fine. And what we did was we layered on all that stuff. If we could just start to remove that and realize that everything you need is in you now. You have everything you need to do everything you want to do. It's just that we learn not to trust that. So we'll hold that as a metaphor. Now, you heard this morning, I was listening, I've got one of these great rooms right over here where I could sit in my room and listen to what was going on down here. And whoever was introducing in the morning said that you know about this combination lock idea. And I think you had, 10, 24/7? Yeah. And think about that model. I was eating dinner with a guy who's the Alabama State chess champion. We were talking about success. And he said, if you know the combination to the lock, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, young or old, male or female, if your IQ is 150 or your IQ is 50. If you know the combination, the lock has to open. And what I've discovered in my work, and I've been doing this work for 30 years. I started with a man named W. Clement Stone, who was worth $600 million back in 1968. And he taught me everything he knew about success, and I've been applying it to my own life and teaching it to others. And then I've done hundreds and hundreds of workshops where I've been the student and gone to India and studied with masters and so on over the years. But there is a combination. There is a system. If you know the combination, you can unlock success. The problem is many of us are missing a few of the numbers. And so what I'd like to do today is just kind of remind us and maybe share some of the new things that you might have forgotten. Now, here's a man named J. Paul Getty. He was at once the richest man in America. And when they asked him what were the secrets of success, he said there are three. It's very simple. He said, get up early, work hard, and find oil. Not that complicated. So obviously it's a little more tricky than that. At Keller Williams, they have a formula or a system. It's a real estate sales company. And they said if you'll make 5 in-person sales calls and 10 over-the-phone calls every day, write 15 thank you notes to the 15 people you talk to, and view 5 new properties, that system always produces a high success rate in this company. So it's a system. It's a formula. Again, 5, 10, 15, 5. Again, this morning, 10, 24/7 that you've learned in Peak Potentials. So there are some formulas. Now, when I studied this, I came up with 64 universal principles that I've studied over the last 36 years. I don't expect to share all those with you today. Maybe we'll get through 9 if we're lucky. But this is a book I wrote called The Success Principles. It's now in 17 languages. You can see a couple of them up there. The one on the far left is in Russian. I was just speaking in Cannes last week in France to 6,500 women from Russia, the Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. I found out my name over there is Giek. Literally, we'd come out of the hotel and there'd be 500 women going, Giek, Giek, photo, Giek, autograph, Giek. And all of a sudden, I was really glad I'm not Brad Pitt because you couldn't move. But anyway, this book has really taken Russia by storm. And there was one man stood up and he said, you know, I bought 100 copies of your book and gave them to everyone in my village, and our village has totally changed. We've changed how we're governing ourselves. We've changed how we're doing business. So we know these principles work universally. They're not just American principles. And I'll also share a little bit of some of the new ideas that I have about the law of attraction that has to come out of the secret. There's some things I think that are missing in that movie, things we said but that got edited out that I think are useful to touch on. So that's where we'll be going today. Now, would you rather take the short route or the long route to success? Very good. Me too. Wouldn't it make sense to just go straight for the cheese and not get caught in the maze? So I've devoted my life to go further and faster with less effort. My next book is called Effortless Success. Alan Cohen, who talked to you yesterday, has a book. I just bought it in the airport, didn't even know it was out yesterday, read it halfway here to Denver yesterday before I came to Aspen, called Relax into Wealth. And so what we're all seeing now is it doesn't have to be as hard as most of us had made it. So we'll talk about how we can make it a little easier. Now, the promise I make, if you do the things I teach you, you can learn to double your income and double your time off and create more balance and fun in your life. And all of my students who work with me do that in 2 years or less. So it's easy to do if you put in the time and you make the commitment to do the work. Now, in my own life, as Mark shared with you this morning, we've sold over 110 million copies of our books that are in 47 languages right now. And this is little Marky Hansen that came from Waukegan, Illinois, and little Jackie Canfield who grew up in West Virginia. And when I grew up in West Virginia, we were the 48th worst state in terms of education in the country, and that's when there wasn't Alaska and Hawaii as states, so we were the bottom. I had a dysfunctional family. My mother was an alcoholic. My father was a workaholic and somewhat abusive. She divorced him when I was 6, to save the kids from getting beat up. And so if I can do it, you can do it. I graduated from the half of the class in my college that made the top half possible. So just want you to understand it's not about brain power, but it's about how you use your brain to do the work. Okay. Mark and I also have a Guinness Book of World Records. You probably know that. We have 7 books on the New York Times bestseller list on one day. And I share that with you not to impress you about me, but to impress upon you if a little kid from West Virginia who got a C in composition in college can go on and become a best-selling author, anybody in this area here can do anything as well. There's a check written to me for $1,130,328.35. Publisher wrote that was the first check he ever wrote for $1 million. He put a smiley face in his signature. Mark and I got 4 of those checks that year. Our combined income each that year was over $6 million. Again, if I can do it, you can do it. Jim Rohn, great motivational speaker, says you can't hire other people to do your push-ups for you. Think about that. I can't hire anyone here to go to Gold's Gym and work out for me. You can't do my meditation for me. You can't do my visualization for me. All the things that I'm going to share with you are things you cannot delegate to others. This is the work. Harv said, there's work to do. You have to work on yourself. When I speak at the National Speakers Association, and people say, I want to be a speaker like you. I want to go out and make all money and affect the world and change people. What advice would you give me? And I said, the first thing is work on yourself. When I first learned about personal growth, I took 38 weekend workshops in 1 year. The only weekends I wasn't taking workshops was when there weren't any. Mother's Day, Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas, etc. Spent $17,000 out of my $38,000 income taking workshops back when they were like $100 for a weekend. But the point is, it's that level of work on yourself that opens up and takes off the clay and allows your natural genius to come forward. Buckminster Fuller, who Mark Victor Hansen talked about, said there's no such thing as a genius. He said some children are just damaged less. It means there's less clay on the golden Buddha or the golden Christ that lives inside of each of them. Now, the first principle, if you're taking notes, this would be a good place to start. And if you're not taking notes, this would also be a good place to start. And that is to take 100% responsibility for your life and your results. Now, most of you have heard that before, but I would ask you a question. Have you ever blamed anyone for anything in the last year? We get mad perhaps at the president or the economy or the oil prices, or we blame other people for our not being successful. You literally have to give up all blaming and take 100% responsibility for your life, that you're creating it the way it is. You have to give up complaining. Complaining means I have a reference point for something I prefer that I'm not willing to risk creating. If I was complaining about my wife, it would mean that I have to have a reference point of someone better out there that I would rather be with, that I'm not willing to risk leaving my wife to go be with. Or I'd have to risk working with my wife and sharing with her there were things I didn't like about her that I would want her to change, and that might create a conversation that might be a little bit uncomfortable. But without taking that risk, I can't create what I want. If all the women in the world tomorrow died except for my wife, and I came to work, would I be complaining about my wife? No, I'd be going, hey, there's only one woman, and guess what? I got her. You only complain when there's a possibility of something better. Complaining tells you there's something I want I don't have, and when you complain, that's not an activity that's going to produce it. It's simply something that says I'm going to complain about it rather than do anything about it. Give up all justifying for why you didn't achieve your results, all defending your positions that don't work, and all excuse making. Now, I met this kid named Matty Christensen when he was 11 years old. We were interviewing him for one of our chicken soup books. And he said, if you look at the picture, you'll notice he has no arms past the elbow and no legs past the knee. He's got 2 prosthetic devices on his knee, from the knee down for his legs and his feet. And he's got a lacrosse stick appended to his arm, prosthetic device, which allows that to be his pitching hand and his catching glove. And at 11 years old, Matty's baseball team was number 2 in the state of New York, with him being the pitcher. So what that tells us is it doesn't matter what your condition is, you can still choose to create what you want and become a champion. Matty said to me when I interviewed him, he said, you have to give up all of your excuses and find a way. He says, if you're going to be successful, you have to be solution-oriented rather than a complainer. I was getting a seminar on success from an 11-year-old boy. Now, there are 3 things we have control over in your life: your thoughts, your images, and your behavior and your actions. Harv does a seminar called The Millionaire Mind. It's the idea of our thoughts making and controlling our reality. So I want to look at thoughts with you for just a minute. We'll see how the weather holds out here. Hopefully we'll make it through this. What I'd like you to do is look down at the end of your hand. You'll notice there is a little line that goes across your wrist. Does everybody have like a little indentation, a little wrinkle that goes across there? And you'll have one on the other side as well. And here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to line those up perfectly, and then put your hands together like that, but start them so that they're coming directly from that line. And if you're like most people, you're going to find that one of your hands is a little longer than the other. Most of you find that? Take your shorter hand and put it in front of your face. If your hands are the same length when you do that, take either hand and put it in front of your face. And here's what I want you to do. I'm from California, like Barbara, so we do a lot of weird stuff there. So I want you to look at your hand, and we're going to say out loud in unison 8 times, grow longer. Okay? So we're just going to intend for our hand to grow longer. We're going to do it in unison. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Grow longer. 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 Okay, stop. Now line them up exactly the same as before, and notice what happened. How many of you found that it did get longer? Very good. So what this shows us is the power of our intention and the power of our minds over physical matter, starting with our body. And we see that we actually have that power over physical matter all throughout the universe. Now, the good news is we can do this. The bad news, in case there are any men thinking about this, is that so far the research has only been on the hands, okay? So I don't want you to waste a lot of time tonight with this. All right. Now, we've all heard of the internet. You've all used the internet. You've got Blackberries, and you send wireless telephone calls. We can call someone in Singapore right now and talk to them. How does that work? There's waves that go through the air, and there's what we call amplitude. How high does the wave go? And there's frequency. How often does it go up and down? And by controlling those amplitudes and frequencies, we can create information. We can encode information and send it across the world. We now know, a friend of mine coined the term the internet, a guy named Bob Scheinfeld, who wrote a book called Busting Loose from the Money Game. And he made the point that we literally, every thought we think is extended around the world like a giant email sent out over this thing which he refers to as the internet. And we know that it works, and we know it goes quite far for the following reason. There is research with the astronauts where they'll have astronauts up on the moon or up in lunar modules 250,000 miles above the Earth, and they'll have them open envelopes at random times, and there'll be a shape in there like a square or a circle or a pentagon or a parallelogram or a rectangle. And they'll look at it and they'll concentrate on it for several minutes while there are students back at Duke University in the parapsychology labs who will close their eyes, go into a meditative state, and see if they can receive what the astronaut's sending. And they get a high correlation between what they're sending, way beyond chance, in terms of them able to pick up this thought form without any amplification through technology or energy waves, radio waves, that kind of thing. So we know that our thoughts can travel 250,000 miles. So I love what Ralph Waldo Emerson said. He said, "Great men are they who see the spiritual thought is stronger than any material force, that their thoughts rule the world." Our thoughts literally travel all across the world. There's actually people that are now contemplating and projecting out from their work in quantum physics and neuroscience and metaphysics that 1 hour of inner work, working with visualization, working with the law of attraction, working with affirmations, working with the power of intention, like you just did with Grow Longer, that 1 hour of that kind of work actually will produce the same results of 7 hours of physical labor in the world in terms of achieving your goals, whether they're financial goals like becoming a millionaire, or whether they're other kinds of goals like ending world hunger, that kind of thing. How many of you are familiar with the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto, the Messages of Water? Great. So Emoto's work proves that when we think thoughts about water, it changes the molecular structure of the water. So they would have students send negative energy up to a bottle of water, like "you fool," "you idiot," and what would happen, they'll take that water and they will freeze it to 20 degrees below zero, put it in a petri dish, and then they will bring it out, put it under a microscope, and they will look at that water, and as it starts to melt, it forms crystals, or not. When you send negative energy, you get this kind of blobby black formation that occurs. When you send love and gratitude or thank you, you get these beautiful crystals that look like snowflakes. And so we know that one kind of energy, which we call negative critical energy, creates one form, and positive energy creates another. Then he said, how far does this intention to the water extend? So they took 10,000 Japanese, and over a 2-hour period, they sent love to all the water in the world. This was a couple of summers ago in July. And they took water samples the day before and the day after, and look what happened. Here's water taken from Lake Biwa. It's the largest freshwater lake in Japan. The day before, it's nondescript kind of energy. 2 days later, we see these beautiful crystals having been formed. Here's the St. Croix River up near Minnesota and Wisconsin. And we see the day before and we see the day after. The day after we get these crystals. Here's the Mississippi River. We're halfway around the world and our thoughts are still affecting the water. And as you know from Masaru Emoto's work, your body is about 80 to 85% water. Although today you're probably more like 75% because you haven't been drinking enough. But the idea is we are water, and our thoughts are affecting us and each other. And so what does this tell us about success? Every thought I think, they're not going to buy my product. They won't like my record. They're not going to give me a job. We're not going to find a parking space. You are literally sending out energy ahead of you that's pre-paving the highway you're driving down and setting up the kind of response you're going to get, especially when it deals with individuals, because you're telling them how to think.